Welcome to Divorced Muslims, A Second Chance, the podcast that uplifts voices for both divorced and single Muslims. Alhamdulillah wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah amma ba'd rabbi shrah li sadri wa yassir li amri wahlul 'uqdatan min lisani yafqahu qawli. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh to all our listeners, and welcome to another episode of our podcast Divorced Muslims, A Second Chance. In today's episode, we are joined by brother Imran, and I guess I'll hand it over to Imran to introduce himself.
Imran, awesome. I mean, there's so many different ways you could introduce me, but I guess for the purposes of this podcast, back in 2019, I launched my own podcast, which is called Divorced Muslim Dad. And the reason was that having gone through a divorce myself a decade previously, and also being a father and co-parenting children and attempting to do so in a way which would help them to establish their faith as well, I realized how tough and lonely it was, and that actually divorce is something which is pretty prevalent in our community, unfortunately. It is in wider society, and we're no different. There's no point pretending otherwise. We do have problems. And so the purpose of launching the podcast was so that I could share pretty intimate details, but not inappropriate details related to some of the experiences that I had pre-marriage, during marriage, after marriage. So yeah, that's I guess that's how you found me.
Yes, I listened to quite a few episodes actually, and mashallah, they were very interesting. So I guess I'd begin with you and your divorce. Just a few very quick questions. How long ago was your divorce?
2010.
And how long were you married for?
10 years.
And how did you come across your ex-partner?
So I was 23 at the time and had recently been made redundant. So yeah, not normally the route you find yourself towards looking for marriage. Looking back, and it is difficult to look back and accurately assess, what kind of state of mind you were in. But I think confusion was one of them. I decided that I was going to try and resolve this confusion by doing something which I was told, and I'm sure I felt at the time, was the right thing to do, which was to establish half my deen. And so I was looking for marriage, and I'd met a few people previously, and nothing had really worked. And this was kind of pre-digital, right? So this was simply done through personal networks. And finally, somebody in the north of England came forward and said, "Look, there's this person we think might be suitable for you." So I took a plunge. I didn't have anything to lose. I drove up north. I studied up north, so I was kind of familiar with the terrain. And within 3 months, I found myself married. That's the short version.
Okay. So the next, I guess, natural question would be, what happened? Like, how would you answer the question of what was the cause or the reason for divorce? Why did it all end?
I mean, how long is this podcast? From where I sit now, knowing what I do, I actually think my ex-wife and I were pretty lucky that we ended up with each other. And now that might sound a bit strange and counterintuitive, but considering what I know about her upbringing and knowing what I know about my upbringing, the fact that we were able to navigate a very tricky relationship, bring up children, and divorce on good terms, and also co-parent on good terms is a minor miracle, actually. And it's a bit strange. I joke with her sometimes now that, she was the best person that I could have married if I was to have got divorced. And what I mean by that is that if this was to have happened, then, it kind of happened with the right person, because we were very fortunate in that we both recognized the khair in our marriage. Also recognizing that we were not suited at all as a husband and a wife. And sometimes this confuses people when I speak like this about things. It's almost as if, well, are you sure? Are you sure you weren't compatible? You sound like you're quite fond of your ex-wife. Yes, I am fond of my ex-wife, right? But I wasn't as fond when we were married. It just was something that we really tried to make work. We went through different phases of trying to make it work. We recognized certain patterns which we were able to resolve, but in the process of uncovering and resolving those patterns, we had created new problems and new baggage that kind of stacked up and eventually toppled over. I know this is all sounding a little bit generic. I guess that's because in my podcast, I've actually gone into like lots of detail about all of this and some of the problems that we faced. And I can mention kind of a few that come to mind right now. I don't think I was the right person to have married my ex-wife. My ex-wife was a new convert to the faith. She didn't convert because of me, but she was a new convert. And somebody who converts to the faith that is going through a tremendous change. I mean, it's just obvious now, right? It's just obvious. And at the time, I don't think she had the right protective factors around her to ensure that she was given the time and the space in order to settle her deen and to settle her new life as such before considering marriage. But unfortunately, at the time, the people she was surrounded by were really encouraging her to get married as soon as possible. So that's one thing. I myself was, what's the best way of putting it? Not fully emotionally developed. I think that's a kind way of putting it. I wasn't in a financial situation, so circumstantially, I mean, I wasn't working financially, wasn't particularly stable. I'd be moving to a new area as well, and I really didn't have any track record of understanding really what it meant to be a husband. I didn't understand that, and so you kind of put the two of us together, and it just from the very beginning, it felt rocky. It felt rocky, but I wasn't really one to give up very easily. I think over the years, the reason why I clung on and I hung on and kind of tried to see it through was because of the model of a relationship that was left to me by my mother and father. Now, I'm not going to get deeply into the whole kind of psychological kind of side of things, but I think it's clear now to a lot of people that, you have to pick up your model of relationships from somewhere. It's not something you're born with. You may be born with a personality or a temperament or whatever, but in terms of how you relate to the opposite sex within a relationship, that's something you learn. Now, the primary source of that is going to be your mother and father, right? It's not the only source, right? And it by no means, it doesn't mean that you can't be fatalistic about these things either, in that, oh, well, if my mother and father had, a particular type of relationship, that's the kind of relationship I'm going to have with my wife. Now, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that, um, one of the aspects of the model that I think I picked up on was that divorce is not something that you consider. You basically do your duty. It doesn't matter how you feel. There's a duty here. Marriage is an institution, right? It's not something that you walk away from. It doesn't matter how bad it gets. You always keep on trying. And so that meant that was a double-edged sword. So that meant that, yes, I was always willing to go back to the well in an attempt to try and resolve our differences. And to my ex-wife's credit, so was she. But it meant that we did compound. If I look back now, I think we did compound each other's pain. It wasn't a time of awareness that I think we live in now. For example, if I say attachment styles, most people listening to this probably will have some kind of idea as to what I'm talking about. If I talk about love languages, right? Again, most people will probably understand what a love language is. This kind of terminology it may have existed, but it wasn't popular at the time. So you essentially had two people who were just kind of flapping around, attempting to resolve things. And yes, we did attempt counseling. And I did recognize at the time that it would have been ideal if we would have had somebody from a Muslim background who would be able to better understand us and give us advice. But again, it wasn't something that was readily available. And so that we decided that we would go to Relate. And Relate is a great organization, essentially made up of, qualified counselors. And I think we attempted that on a couple of occasions, and it didn't really resolve what we needed it to. Ultimately, I guess you could summarize it as two people who are unprepared for marriage, if I'm honest, not suitable for marriage, getting married, and then my ex-wife falling pregnant within a month, meant that it wasn't going to be easy to walk away from. As I said, that wasn't going to be my go-to anyway, but that solidified things. And then you overlay onto that financial uncertainty and cultural differences too. That was an interesting one, in that I felt, having grown up in the UK, born here, grown up here, having grown up in a very multicultural part of West London, I felt that it wasn't going to be difficult for me to culturally be compatible with somebody of her background. But again, that was challenging too, because it's again not something that I'd experienced, and it kind of it came to the surface at different times. It's not that it was a problem as such. I got on very well, and I still do get on very well with her family, and she got on very well with mine, and still does as well. But when it came to things like, again, I've done an episode on this called the Jesus Complex, which is all about how Christmas would become a very difficult time of year, because Christmas for her was simply a family tradition. And for me at that time, I couldn't define it as anything other than a religious experience, and one which could not be engaged with. I was very rigid about this. And when you have children involved in that, then it becomes a little bit more fraught, and you can understand that it becomes more difficult to kind of navigate that kind of thing. So every year, you would have this particular thing kind of being thrown up. So yeah, over the course of 10 years, and I'm actually quite proud we lasted 10 years. We had many doubts. It wasn't all bad, of course. We had many ups too. But the great thing is that we were able to come out of it. And what I really like, and I don't take credit for this, by the way. I only take credit for maybe I've done 50% of it, because obviously it requires somebody else to reach out to, and for there to be a level of cordial relationship. But I do say, when people divorce, there are three types of divorce. The one which is unfortunately most common, which is two people completely lose their minds. Um, and when that happens, and again, as Muslims, children are typically involved in relationships, in marriages, the children really do suffer. And this has long-term consequences for the community, which I'm happy to talk about perhaps a bit later. And then the second type is when one person kind of stays rational. And I don't just mean the man here, it can be the woman or the man. I don't want to play into those stereotypes, but one person stays rational, the other person loses their mind. And that's chaos as well, because it really does take both parties to remain cool headed and recognize the humanity of each other, to recognize the effort that each person has put in, and also to recognize that if you have children, you are kind of bound for life. And if they are small kids, or they haven't reached the age of independence, then you're going to be working quite intimately together. And the better you can work together, the better the chance your children are going to have to grow up in a way where they feel loved, and in a way that they feel secure as well. And whilst people listening might think, well, that sounds like you kind of had a perfect ending with this. Don't get me wrong. It was really hard. The marriage was hard. The divorce was tough. It took me right to the edge, right? And sometimes Allah does this. I'm not blaming Allah, by the way. Sometimes Allah gives you an experience whereby you kind of see yourself for the first time, really. You're stripped away. Everything that you kind of built as scaffolding for your identity and for your life is completely snatched away. And you're just left looking in the mirror, asking yourself, well, who are you really? At the time, we lived in a detached 5-bedroom house that had to be sold. There was a short period post-divorce, where I was sleeping on my mother's sofa. I then ended up, I was in rented accommodation for a while. Within a year, my ex-wife had remarried as well, and had moved to another part of the UK, which was an hour away, which had profound implications for the children, and where they would be schooled, and how often I would see them, and that kind of thing. So now you can understand that, yes, it wasn't all sunshine and light. It required digging deep, going deep. It required her to compromise. It required me to compromise. It required me to swallow my pride, swallow my ego, always with the idea in mind that ultimately I don't want to look back on my life with regrets and think that the people that Allah asked me to look after, I put myself first. And whilst it's never been perfect, none of us are. Now that my children are older, they were 9 and 6 when we divorced, and they are now in their early 20s. I look at them and I'm proud of them. I'm proud of the people, the adults that they've become, and it was a joint effort. Not just actually, it wasn't just a joint effort in terms of myself and my ex-wife. It was also my mother, my sister, her mother, her father. It was a joint effort in that regard.
Thank you for that. One of the things I wanted to focus on, Brother Imran, was cast your mind back. What impact did divorce have on you? I appreciate you said it was tough. What would you say to that?
It's a complete game changer. It's a complete game changer. And there are many times in life where, for all of us, Allah will provide us with a fork in the road. And isn't just one in life, there are many. And these are opportunities, right? We can choose which path to go down with Allah's guidance. And sometimes those choices are easy. And sometimes these forks in the road are things that you have guided yourself towards, right? And in other times, they are completely unexpected or you didn't desire them at all. And divorce is one of those things. Obviously, nobody gets into a marriage thinking about getting divorced. Although I have to say at this point, if you think about the statistics around divorce, right? I think it's around 50% of marriages end in divorce. Now, if you think about that, that's pretty astounding. That is pretty astounding that 1 in 2 marriages ends in divorce. But everybody who gets married thinks it's somebody else, right? Even though the chances are very, very high, right? So the fact that this happens shouldn't be a surprise, but ultimately I guess it's something that nobody really wishes to comprehend, and that compounds it when it happens. Human beings are great at repackaging things, compartmentalization, hiding things under the rug, avoiding issues, making up stories. There's so many different ways of kind of dealing with problems or not dealing with problems. And I think a lot of that goes on in a marriage until it gets to a point where one partner typically can't carry on. And when that happened with us, it wasn't actually either of us. I do remember both of us sitting at the dinner table and we both looked shattered. Like we looked empty. We looked physically, you could see it on our faces that we were emotionally drained, that we had nothing left. And we basically looked at each other and said, this can't continue because one or both of us is going to get ill. We're going to want to get ill if we carry on like this. And we agreed there and then that we would have to make steps towards separating initially. Now, the go-to for any couple is usually separating. Separating, I think, is there, even though sometimes divorce is obvious, because it's just about relieving pressure. Two people just don't need the pressure around each other, so they go and live in separate places. But typically, separation is revelation for one or both of the people involved. It's a revelation that your codependency perhaps wasn't as important as you thought it was. Now, imagine you're in a marriage. Forget after 10 years, after a year, a few years, you kind of you're a unit. You function together, right? You become a little bit symbiotic. Even bad relationships, they need to rely on each other. And then after a period of time, that simply becomes the way you are, right? And it becomes difficult then to envisage being by yourself, right? It just becomes something very difficult to envisage. And so when presented, if you do go through a separation, sometimes you realize, actually, I feel a lot better by myself. And then that accelerates the process towards divorce, which is why the few people I've spoken to who are counselors, kind of avoid the separation side of things unless it's absolutely necessary in order to protect people. Right. But that's just an aside. And for us, as we had a period where we were separated, she lived close by. We were able to kind of interact a little bit, but it did drag on a little bit because I think neither of us was really willing to kind of pull the trigger on the relationship. It was just kind of, I guess, relationship barzakh, neither alive nor dead. We were just kind of floating in space, trying to work out, like, were we really going to end 10 years? Were we really going to break up a family? How would we do this? What would it mean? And eventually it got to a point where we did then do that because there was nothing left to do. The house was on the market. We were seeing less of each other. It was simply a case of kind of cooperating over the children. And that, when we signed the documents, people are expecting this to be the moment, but it isn't. It isn't really the moment. It's a bit like when you go to, or if you've had the unfortunate kind of experience of a bereavement, and it's not really the days where there are people around that are the toughest. It's the days when you're by yourself trying to recover, and it's just you and the voices in your head. And I guess that's where you have the opportunity to speak to Allah, when you're really alone, when you're really isolated. And that's what I did. I remember sitting in my local masjid, and I was there by myself. I was just there by myself, and I cried. I just, I'm not somebody who doesn't cry, but I'm also not somebody who easily cries. But I was completely lost. I didn't know how I was going to look after my children. I didn't know where I was going to live. At the time, I was going through a difficult time with work too. And work, it's always been important to me in terms of doing something in line with my values. So that was up in the air as well. So some people say that some of the most difficult things you go through in life is kind of a marriage or a divorce, moving property, and changing job. I had all of these things going on at the same time. So it really was existential. For me, it was, excuse the description, but looking at myself naked in the mirror, there was nothing there. Everything that I had built up as my identity had been stripped away. And so it was about trying to rebuild myself from the bottom up. And it is only through Allah's grace that I was able to navigate that period, because it was incredibly hard.
And that is my actual next question. You talked about impact. How do you bounce back from divorce?
So what I've noticed, and this is just anecdotal, this is not based upon any polling or research, is that from the relationships that I have seen in the community, men tend to uh, remarry relatively quickly, or at least before their ex-wife. Sometimes this can happen quite quickly. Now, people are different, right? People are different. We need to take that into account. For me personally, I was aware that there was parts of me that needed to be questioned, that I needed to take responsibility for my failings in the marriage, in the breakdown of the marriage. Now, that's not being a martyr, right? She clearly also had the same issues to contend with, but that's not for me to hold her to account. She's my ex-wife. That's for her to consider. I could only take into consideration myself, and to look back over the period of being married, and again try and understand why I behaved the way I behaved, right? What is it that I did which was not conducive to a healthy relationship? And that just requires time, patience, introspection, and guidance from actually people who know what they're talking about, people who are able to, say to you and basically hold you to account. You don't need yes people around you. You don't need people just to boost your ego, right? You don't need people telling you, oh, listen, don't worry about it. Plenty more fish in the sea. Just get back on your horse. Don't worry about it. No, there's plenty to worry about, because something quite profound happened. And when something quite profound happened, in my view, you need to take a step back and understand it as best you can, in order not to repeat the same mistakes in a future relationship, right? And also be able to model better behavior when it comes to your children, as well. So in the same way that I picked up certain things from my parents, my children will be picking up certain things from me. So just because I'm divorced, it kind of sharpened my mind, actually, because now you're a father, right? You're not just a father as part of a unit. You're going to have to really focus in on what a father is able to do with the time you have available, right? And so you rebuild yourself into the person that you need to be at that time in order to serve what's important to you at that time. And for me, that was ensuring that my children, you can't say are not impacted. Of course, they're going to be impacted, but the impact is going to be, any negativity is going to be lessened. And actually, maybe we can draw some positivity out of this too. For example, some people may say, oh, what can be positive from a divorce? Well, I would hope, and I know this because they're older now and we can talk. They know I respect their mother. They know that. Yeah. They know that, and that she respects me too, and that we have a healthy divorce, right? And that, well, I'm sure we inadvertently have, but we haven't drawn the kids into any disagreements. that we might have, right? And so, yeah, getting back to your question about how do you rebuild? You need good people around you. As I say, not yes people, but people who know what they're talking about, wise people. Kind of in the old days, these would be the elders of the village, right? But none of us live in villages anymore. Well, not in the UK or any Western country anymore. Why? Because of neoliberalism and individualism. I would say you need good people around. You need to find those people, probably older people, probably people who've been through experiences, and you need to learn from them. And you need to allow them to shelter you as well. And I would say to men need the opportunity to be able to talk. And the reason I phrase it like that is because I know men want to talk, right? And the reason I know that is because 2 years ago, here in South Manchester, I established something called Brothers in Arms. Now, Brothers in Arms is a relationship support group for brothers going through relationship problems. And it's as I say, it's been running for 2 years now, and we have monthly. Well, we started off with group meetings, and then when that tailed off, we switched it to one-to-ones. And we have a steady flow of men who really need to talk, and they can't talk to the community because they don't want their community to know their business, and they don't want to talk to family because at worst, the family will make it worse and take sides, or at best, it's not something they wish to burden family with, so they need a safe space, a confidential, safe space simply to offload, take the pressure off. And that's what we've done at the local masjid here in South Manchester. So men do want to talk, right? Whether they are going through a divorce or whether they have been divorced, it's important to surround yourself with community and good people and to give yourself time, really to give yourself as much time as you need. There'll be lots of people offering you advice, right? There'll be lots of people who are unqualified, inexperienced. Actually, unqualified is not an issue. I'm not a qualified person, but there'll be a lot of people giving unsolicited advice and poor advice as well when it comes to relationships. And you just need to be a bit wary. You need to really be able to listen to yourself, to look inwards, to ask yourself the difficult questions, to give yourself time to answer those questions with the help of others, perhaps therapists, perhaps a counselor, perhaps an elder. And personally, I would say it's a great sign if you become comfortable being by yourself. Now, I don't mean comfortable as in you don't wish to have another relationship. I simply mean that you aren't looking for a relationship to fill any kind of void in your life. Marriage isn't there to fill a void. It's there to enhance the life that you already live. And you have many ways in which to express the best side of yourself outside of a marriage. And therefore, your goal is to see the divorce as an opportunity to reach that place that perhaps you hadn't previously. And that's why you see perhaps a lot of people who go through divorces, they become different people because they take a new interest in themselves. They start prioritizing things. Perhaps I would suggest that you see people going through a divorce, and yes, you can end up in an unhealthy place. The goal is to end up in a healthy place, a wiser place. You perhaps look after your physical fitness a little bit more. Perhaps you take care of your community a little bit more. You have a greater appreciation of the people around you. Perhaps you strengthen the bonds between yourself and your family, your community, and perhaps your children as well. And through the whole process, come out the other side and actually think you can get to a point where you think, Alhamdulillah for all of it. Alhamdulillah for being married, Alhamdulillah for the marriage ending, and for me being given the opportunity to rebuild and become the person that I am.
Alhamdulillah. Just stemming from that, I know you mentioned that, roughly 50% of marriages end up in divorce. At the same time, what's also interesting is that I don't know what the stats are, but from what I've seen, a lot of British Muslims are finding it extremely difficult to get married, right? What would you say, in your opinion, what is the problem here?
There is a problem. But you see, the thing is, it's not just us, right? It's wider society as well. There is a problem in people finding long-term relationships, right? And there's lots of ideas around how that's that's happened. I mentioned previously that, we kind of live in isolation. That has to be a contributing factor. Typically, the places where people would meet, like physically meet people and spend time with people and get to know people just by simply being in the same space, those places are becoming non-existent for many of us, and accelerated by COVID as well. So I've got kids now who technically are at kind of marriageable ages. And I actually encourage them to keep an eye out when they were at university. I said to them, right, okay, this is one of the few times you're actually going to be somewhere where you're going to be surrounded by other Muslims, right, of a similar age, a similar stage of life, in an environment where you basically get an idea of who the other person is. And so if you spot somebody, right, that you think you would like to kind of take things further with, then just let us know. And, we'll do our best to kind of do what we need to do in order to reach a conclusion on that. But if you take university out of it, where are people actually meeting? As I say, we don't have a village anymore. So back in the day, everyone in the village knew each other, and people kind of were matched accordingly. Mainly the women folk in the village would basically start matching people from a very young age. We don't live in that environment anymore. We live in this world of independence. And so you think, okay, well, maybe in the world of work, again, unlikely, because many of us from the community, of course, we are looking to marry another Muslim, and we live in a Muslim minority country. So even in a workplace, it's unlikely you're going to come across somebody who is going to be suitable for you if you want to look at it from a faith-based perspective. And so the working from home thing has kind of done away with that. And so what are you left with? What are the options? The options are the auntie network, which still exists, but many of us don't like the idea of, because we think it's just too much interference. Again, we have been conditioned to believe that we don't need other people involved in our business. Now, I'm not saying conditioned necessarily badly. Village is a very kind of idealistic idea, but many people who live in villages hate the fact that everybody knows their business. They want the autonomy of the city. And so they go to the city and they can basically be who they want, do what they want. And so there's this kind of yin and yang when it comes to those things. But when it comes to kind of searching for marriage, the kind of the yin to the yang of like the network is the wild west of online, and there isn't really any kind of in between space. And so many people find comfort in being online, and that's the way they're going to find a partner. And the thing is, I think it's been proven that online dating is really inefficient in terms of the amount of time an individual has to spend on one of those things. And it's not meritocratic at all. So it's not like every individual is going to have the same chance, right, of finding success. The very fact that it's done on your phone, right, and the way these apps are designed is that essentially you make a judgment call based upon how somebody looks. That's the very first thing that you do. And therefore, naturally, those people who are better looking tend to get more out of those apps than those who perhaps are not. So it's not a meritocratic place at all. And so you essentially have a population of, I wouldn't just say young people, I would say, young, middle-aged people who are available, who are not meeting in natural environments where they can actually get to know a person, feel their personality in a way which is easy, which is not contrived. It's not massively contrived. It's like, okay, I'm here, you're here. I got to know you over a period of 3 months. Oh, I kind of like that person. I wonder if she would be interested, kind of thing. There's nothing wrong with that. That's a perfectly halal way in which to find somebody, but those opportunities don't exist. And so you end up in the online space, and a lot of people, when you're online, you are essentially dealing with largely unqualified leads. If you want to talk in sales terms, these are people who have they've maybe done an identity check, but ultimately it's a presentation of a person that person sees of themselves. And even the way they present themselves is going to tell a very different story to the way you receive that information. It's very inefficient. It's very frustrating. Most people who've experienced it, have experienced this kind of new behavioral kind of language of ghosting and breadcrumbing and all of this kind of stuff. And it leaves people, again, emotionally exhausted and apathetic as well. Again, when you throw into the mix a lot of social media discourse around gender, rights, responsibilities, you have this kind of toxic soup, if you like, where people are becoming very cynical and skeptical about the opposite sex in general. And also, kind of, I think people become very wary of getting to know somebody else and actually hypersensitive to the idea of red flags and green flags and beige flags and this kind of thing. And yeah, it's really quite difficult. And it's interesting you asked me that question, because just today after Jumma, I was talking to a friend of mine walking back home. And I said to him, we really need to do something about this specific problem. Because I said, there has to be a role for the masjid to be able to recognize what's going on here and not just match people in a way which is quite traditional. Actually design something, design a way for people actually to meet in a way which feels natural and which is halal. Okay, that's the goal. That's the goal here. Where at the moment, all the masjids are super kind of conservative about this issue. I guess they're scared of getting any blame. And they hold these events whereby they ask men to register a particular age group, they ask women to register a particular age group, and then they kind of get to interview each other. And it's just like a marketplace. It's like a job interview. I personally believe it's extremely ineffective. You know, if you ask me, what I think's a great idea is that you get groups of Muslims, both male and female, and you basically do activities together. Again, halal activities. What might that be? Hiking, right? And I think this kind of thing kind of exists in part of the country. Hiking's like a very kind of accessible thing. Most people are able to do it. And it's a way of spending time with other people in a way which doesn't feel pressured. And so you can go on these things. You can appreciate the beauty of Allah's creation. You can undertake an activity which is fun, which is good for you, but also allows you to actually interact with the opposite sex in a way which is halal, right? And you can get an idea for somebody, and you find that when people are in proximity to each other, they see each other differently than if they're on an app and they're simply judging somebody by how much makeup they may or may not be wearing or how much hair they may or may not have.
Yeah, okay. I just want to gently challenge you on that one, right? So the whole hiking thing and making it halal, one might argue, but does that mean alongside the girl or the girls, their brothers and dads are coming as well?
No.
Well, then the question is that problematic from an Islamic perspective? Allah knows best.
Our sisters, let's talk about the UK. So do they walk around with their mahrams at all times?
The honest answer to that is no.
I'm not trying to catch you out, by the way. So they don't. Okay. Now, do they find themselves in proximity to non-mahram men? Yeah, they do, right? I'm not talking about this from a fiqh perspective. I'm simply talking about the lived reality of people at this moment in time. So you've got this weird situation whereby people are behaving in particular ways around Muslims, but when it comes to non-Muslims, it's completely different. So if you see somebody, for example, uh, from the masjid, and all of a sudden everybody's really shy, right? It's like, oh my god, is that person? Oh yeah, and just look at the ground, look away, blah blah blah. That same person goes into the pharmacy. I don't know why it's always the pharmacy, but anyway, when it goes to the pharmacy, they're just an average person getting on with their life, ordering some medicine, and there's no kind of change of behavior, right? And I do find that odd. Now, you have to understand, I come from a super conservative background of faith. That's how I found faith. The thing is, as you get older, and I don't like using the word liberal because, that has all kinds of connotations, but you just observe the world around you. You observe it. You observe the way people live. You observe the way Muslims live as well. And then you think, if the goal is to build strong Muslim families, if the goal here is to try and get people together in order for people to fulfill Allah's command to find a righteous spouse that they may find comfort in each other. If the goal here is to strengthen the ummah with more children as well. If the goal here is simply to help people on that path towards marriage in a way where they find somebody who is most suitable for them in terms of emotionally, spiritually, and physically. then how can that be achieved in a way which doesn't veer away from, or basically doesn't cross huge red lines in our religion? And that what those red lines are, I think it's fair to say different people draw that line in different places. This is simply my opinion. Men, a Muslim man, right, and a Muslim woman, can they share the same open space together if they are with other people? Is there a risk there of there being something illicit taking place? For me, the answer is no. And they're in an environment that they essentially experience elsewhere in their lives in the UK. But here, the intention is actually to do something good, to try and do something which is pleasing. Now, if somebody's not comfortable with doing something like that, clearly they don't take part in that. But I tell you this much, if we don't create the spaces, if our leaders don't create the spaces, guess what? People will find them themselves. People regulate themselves. The masjid cannot regulate everybody's behavior. They cannot do it. People will do what they need to do, and they are currently. There are people who are engaging in things which are outside of the bounds of the religion. And actually, I think we as a community are complicit to a degree in not providing the safer spaces for them to be able to meet their needs in a way which is halal, and are kind of been left with this gap where the shaitan is able to kind of proliferate.
Yeah. Okay. Um, Let me move on to a different kind of a subject. I'm going to give you a scenario. I just want your view on it. So often, what's happening nowadays is that um, a divorced person finds that once their status is known, i.e., marital status, interest in them drops sharply. Obviously, when they're looking for marriage. So at this point, many of them consider delaying disclosure just to be seen as a person first. Obviously, because this is because of the stigma that's attached around being divorced. So now we have this balancing exercise of being honest and at the same time, essentially, the aspect of getting married. What's your take on this, Imran?
It's very straightforward, actually. I'm not conventional when it comes to this. I see divorce as actually something desirable in a future partner. And therefore, if the person that I were to marry doesn't see that in me, or doesn't have that point of view, then they're not the right person um, for me to marry. Because having been through it, right, I don't think I could ever get together with somebody who hadn't been married before. Because going through a divorce and coming out the other side healthy, it adds different layers to your personality. There's a certain resilience and strength and courage and determination. And it's a real test. And it's quite attractive to think that somebody had been able to navigate all of that and come out the other side a better person. So for me, it's actually something I seek. It's something that I seek. With regards to your scenario, whereby there is a taboo around it in certain communities, and people don't disclose it. Let's say I was the person, I would always disclose it because it's a significant part of my story. And like I said, if the other person doesn't have the ability to understand it or to process it in a way where they're still interested, then that's fine. That's all I need to know. Thank you very much. And again, the other person, should you disclose something to that person, well, I think it's a mark of honesty. And by withholding it, you essentially want somebody to start, I guess, not just see you as a person, but start feeling for you as a person, so that they can ignore this stigma. And I don't think that's honest. I think the best thing is to find somebody who doesn't see divorce as a stigma.
Many sisters argue that a man who is divorced is often seen by society as quote unquote experienced, but a divorced woman is seen as baggage. What's your response to that?
Like I said previously, maybe I'm not typical in this regard, but I truly value, the experience of divorce, and therefore recognize that it potentially has been something somebody else has gone through and come out the other side and has the badges, and just come out better for it. But just more generally, men are more experienced, women are baggage. I think this is something probably more cultural. It's not based in any reality. It's just a case of, I guess it comes down to our ideas around virginity as well, the virginity of a woman and how that's seen and how that's valued as well. And I think there's kind of unhealthy ideas around that. Again, if we really need to understand our faith, we can go back to the earliest generations. And I think it's clear that the earlier generations, there were significant numbers of marriages and divorces. And no, it doesn't make it aspirational, but it is something that needs to happen sometimes. Otherwise, it wouldn't be made halal. So when two people get to a point where it's better for them to be apart than together, then there is the opportunity to do that. And so if it's there, then okay, some people are going to get divorced. Lots of people are going to get divorced. What are we saying here? That a Muslim woman has simply one opportunity to be married. And if she happens to find herself divorced, whether it's through her fault or not, then that's it for her. This idea that a Muslim woman should have only one opportunity to be married is nonsense. It's just total nonsense. And culturally, it probably sits in particular communities, but happily, I think that that is changing. And it has to change because of the number of divorced women there are out there and the number of, divorced men that are out there. And am I saying divorced men for divorced women? I guess I'm thinking, yeah, perhaps, right? They probably have a greater degree of empathy for each other. But there are some lots of incredible divorcees out there. Honestly, actually, I did an episode with a lass who actually she'd never been married. She was in her, I think, 30s, and she was meeting Muslim men who had not been married either. And then she happened to come across one who was divorced. And she found it such an amazing experience. It didn't work, but she found that person like so much more interesting that she actually then developed actually an idea that she would only meet divorced men because she felt that they were just perhaps more mature, more experienced in that way. And so that she could benefit from being with somebody like that. So yeah, we need to give up on those ideas.
Okay. Imran, I'm going to play a couple of games with you, right? The first game is called the red light, green light game. I'm going to give you a few scenarios, and I just want you to tell me whether you'd give that person the green light, the red light. You got the choice of amber light as well. Okay.
Okay.
A potential who has good deen but cannot cook.
Green.
Okay. A potential on the deen but has a previous criminal conviction.
It would depend on what the criminal conviction is, but yeah, green.
Okay. A potential with a social media page with many opposite gender followers.
Green.
A person that does not speak to her family and essentially is living independently.
For me, that's a red.
Person who has a bad past but is a good person today.
Green.
Person who suffered abuse in the past but has healed today.
Green.
Okay. And then the next game, Imran, is what we call a rapid fire round. Okay. The first thing that comes to your head, you got to say. Okay.
Okay, go on.
If you get married, where would you take your spouse to eat on a first date?
IKEA.
That's
I can
a
tell you
unique
why,
answer.
but I can tell you why. But anyway, this is rapid fire.
Okay. What is the best age to get married?
The age of maturity.
What percentage of British Muslims looking for marriage are serious about marriage?
I have no idea.
If your spouse says to you they don't want you on social media, what would be your response?
Why?
How long should one get to know a potential before making the decision to marry them?
As long as it's needed.
What method in today's day and age is the most effective to find a spouse? Apps, marriage events, matchmakers, matrimonial websites, marriage bureaus, or anything that you would suggest?
I can tell you what I have done. I realized that you would need to live in a community with a optimal number of Muslims, and that you should let 2 or 3 people know who are active in that community that who know you well, that you're interested in meeting somebody, and don't put any pressure on them. And then periodically just check up with them, just to remind them, and live your life, be happy, get on with the other 101 things that Allah has given us the opportunity to do. And in time, inshallah, your match will arrive.
Would you sign a prenuptial agreement?
Yes.
Mental health or physical health?
Both.
What do you think it takes to be in a marriage that lasts forever?
Allah's grace.
If there was a book written on you, what would be the title of the book?
He did his best.
What do British Muslims say privately but hesitate to admit publicly?
I do still think that Muslims suffer from a colonial mindset, and I don't think a lot of us are willing to accept that. I think when it comes to marriage, even though many of us wish to be different from perhaps previous generations or express egalitarian views. I still think that the color of somebody's skin matters a significant amount when it comes to the issue of marriage, where white skin is prized and black skin is not. And we're not really having that conversation as much as I would like.
And the final segment is for people who are looking for marriage.
Yeah, go for it. Go for it. I mean, as I said, my attitude to, I've been single now for 15, 16 years. My
Okay.
focus during most of that time was raising children. And for me, doing that independently was important. I didn't want to be distracted. And now kind of moving into a different phase of life where the kids have grown up. And as I say, I've mentioned it to 2 or 3 people in my community. So yeah, why don't you be one of those people?
Yeah, why not? Why not? We can give it a shot. We've got nothing to lose. Marriage profile time, just going to focus on you. What is your age?
49,
Your height?
5'11",
Your location?
South Manchester,
Ethnicity?
Indian,
Occupation?
filmmaker.
In terms of now what you're looking for, what's your age range preference?
5 years above, 10 years below.
Okay. Height preference?
I don't have one.
Location preference?
I'm not particularly fussed by that, but closer is better because, as I say, you have more of an opportunity just to spend some regular time getting to know each other in relatively normal environments, rather than if somebody's on the moon, it becomes a bit more difficult.
Okay. Ethnicity preference?
Don't have one.
Occupation preference?
Don't have one.
Just in a couple of lines, apart from what we've already discussed, what is it that you're looking for?
Really good question. The one quality that is a non-negotiable, right, is being compassionate. And compassionate shouldn't be confused with kindness. The ability to be compassionate is the ability to put empathy into action. So you can be sympathetic towards somebody else. You can feel sorry for them, or you can feel for them. Or you can be empathetic. So when you're empathetic, you feel what the other person feels. But compassion is being able to act on that empathy. And if you get 2 compassionate people who are able to feel what the other person feels and be able to act on that feeling in order to enhance the other person's life, that's what I'm looking for.
Brother Imran, thank you very much for being a part of our podcast. It was an honor to actually have you here. Any final thoughts from you?
Think well of Allah. He is looking after you, whether through the tough times, through the good times. We're only here for a short time. So have a good opinion of him, remember him, and build your life directed towards getting to know him and getting closer to him. And whether you are married or divorced, it's all an opportunity to do that. So Bismillah, Allah bless you all.
If you fit the criteria of the guest today, and if you are interested in considering the guest for marriage, then please email us the following details: your name, age, location, height, occupation, ethnicity, marital status, family contact name, and family contact details. Our email address is divorcedmuslims@gmail.com. Remember the golden rule: only family details will be exchanged. If we have no family details, then the request will be ignored. If you want to be a guest on this podcast, or if you want to contact us, then please email us. Our email address is divorcedmuslims@gmail.com.